the Ukrainian famine of the 1930s, now one of the best-known examples of the suffering endured under the Soviet regime. During the Soviet era, the famine was rarely talked about, but since its independence, Ukraine has been telling the world about this shocking chapter in its history. The famine that claimed millions of lives in Ukraine was caused not by drought, but by Joseph Stalin's collectivization program. To turn private farms into collectives, Stalin needed to crush the existing peasant class and stamp out emerging Ukrainian nationalism. Some wealthier peasants were sent to Siberia, while the poorest were left to starve.
In the autumn 1933, they came to us. They took all the grain. Not a grain, not pea or bean was left. We were deemed too poor to be sent to Siberia. Next time they came, they took away our last baked bread.
Ukrainians recently commemorated the 75th anniversary of the famine. On November 22nd, President Viktor Yushchenko addressed the nation at the Monument to the Famine Victims in Kiev.
We appeal to everyone, above all the Russian Federation, to be true, honest and pure before their brothers in denouncing the crimes of Stalinism and the totalitarian Soviet Union. Terror by famine in Ukraine was a clearly planned act of genocide.
That claim of genocide is firmly rejected by Russia. Russia insists the famine indiscriminately affected many ethnic groups across the Soviet Union. In Kazakhstan, then a Soviet republic, more than 1 million people died during the famine of the early 30s. But there are great differences in the way the Kazakhs and the Ukrainians remember the tragedy. In the Kazakh capital of Astana, a monument to the famine victims has been left unfinished since 1992. And unlike Yushchenko, Kazakhstan's leaders do not call on Russia to reckon with the history of the Soviet Union.
The famine in Kazakhstan is a political issue. Society discusses it, media raise the issue, the stories being told within the families, but there is no political will to discuss the issue of famine in Kazakhstan in 1930s. There are several reasons for that, I believe. One is that it's, of course, Russia. Kazakh leadership believe that by staying quiet about this famine issue, they can avoid provoking Russia. There is another factor as well, I believe, and it's a fact that current Kazakh leadership are those who used to be on the helm during the Soviet time. And dealing with a famine issue could lead to other uncomfortable discussions about other atrocities done during the Soviet time.
That holds true as well for past tragedies within present-day Russia. A decade before the Ukrainian and Kazakh famines under the Bolsheviks, starvation swept the Volga-Ural region in 1921 and 1922. The victims were ethnic Russians as well as minority Tatars, Bashkirs, and others.
Russia doesn't like talking about dark sides of its own history. In case of Ukraine, it's a young Ukrainian state where national elite tries somehow to consolidate itself. In case of Tatarstan, we don't have much political forces to raise the question on the international level. The people simply choose to keep silence about it.
Some 5 million people died in the famine of the early 1920s, but there is no memorial or day of commemoration in Tatarstan or in its neighboring republics.
The issue of the famine should be raised on the international level and should be some political force behind it. If nobody talks about this, it will be forgotten.